When I was a pulpit rabbi, I had congregants who would look in my shopping cart to see what I was buying. It taught me that I'm role modeling not only in the classroom, but at all moments of my life. That doesn't mean that I'm always a great role model of what it means to take care of myself. A month ago, I had a lot on my plate, and Marla, my development director, pulled me aside. Michelle, I know you're overwhelmed, but you gotta manage this better. Your stress is affecting the team. What she was really saying was, Michelle, you're being dismissive, you're being short, get it together. The ironic thing is, my talk today, it's about self-care. I had forgotten in the moment that self-care is not a solo endeavor. Self-care works because it's teamwork. Self-care is team care. Whether you're the executive director or an intern, we're all in this together. And why is self-care, team care especially important for us? Our jobs, they're people-centric. Our work is to help support and nurture our students. And if you're a supervisor, it's to help support and nurture your staff. Wise mentors of mine have taught me that we can only be with another person as fully centered and whole as we are ourselves. And wholeness, it means the whole person. It means the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, the spiritual. Think about a time that you were hungry or overtired, stressed out, or felt attacked from all sides. How is your focus? I know for me, when I have too much on my plate, I can't be fully there for the person who's sitting across from me. And during the conversation, I'm thinking about the next thing on my to-do list, and I miss out on the opportunity to hear, to celebrate, to give that piece of reflective advice the other person so deserves. Self-care is important. And yet I come up with all the excuses. I don't have the time. I don't deserve it. I deny that I need it. So I want to start with a punchline that's a secret. Whatever it is that brings you to wholeness, that gives you fulfillment and joy, you have permission to do it. And yet I know for me, self-care often feels selfish. Our jobs, they're never ending. There's always another email to write, another donor to thank, another student to coffee. And I always feel if I'm leaving at a reasonable hour, I'm not really doing my job. Circumstances were such that my brother came to live with me for a year when he was in job transition. If I was home by 7 p.m., dinner was ready and waiting for me on the table. It was nice. And I found that I was still getting my work done, even when I left at that reasonable hour. And my staff, they noticed my new habit, and they started leaving before the late hours of the night as well. When my brother moved out, I started making regular evening time with my friends. For those of you without a live-in sibling, or more likely, a spouse or children who are calling you home and want your attention in the evening, you have friends. Your friends, they are your family. And you deserve time with them just as much as anyone with a more traditional family has with theirs. And back to that secret. Whatever it is that gives you wholeness, that gives you fulfillment, you have permission to do it too. I know self-care is important, and yet I'm often able to coax myself into doing it when I think about it as role modeling. Remember that shopping cart that my congregants were looking in? Our Hillel students aren't quite that level of intensity, but they're still looking at us. They're still watching us, judging us, copying us. What is it that they're seeing when they look at us? For some of our students, we're the only Jewish role models they have. They look at us and say, that's the Jewish way. What do we want them to be looking at? What is it we want them to be modeling? A few years ago, I wound up going to my doctor for my annual physical. I learned what I already knew. I had gained weight. Actually, what she told me was I was in the wrong weight percentile for my height. And I can't do anything about my height. I started putting my exercise time on my work calendar. I wanted my staff to see that I was prioritizing self-care. They saw that I was working out. They asked about my workout routines. They encouraged me, and I lost the weight. A few years later, my Israel staffer, Shoshana, was checking out her own self-care as well. She started going to SoulCycle classes. She is now an avid enthusiast, and she takes it one step further. She uses it as an engagement technique. She takes her Birthright alumni on reunions to SoulCycle classes. They spin together, and then they learn texts about what Judaism has to say about exercise and self-care. I can hear in your heads right now. Some of you are saying, oh, that's great, Michelle, but I'm not taking on a new exercise routine. And managing up to my supervisor that she's overwhelmed, being a supervisor that's open and vulnerable enough to take that advice, I'm not there yet. So I have a real easy one for you. Did you know that saying thank you is a form of self-care? I recently read a study in the Wall Street Journal that says that when we express gratitude, our immune system is strengthened, our stress and depression levels go down, and we sleep better, and relationships are deepened. Who knew that when you said thank you to someone else, you're not only doing something for them, but you're helping yourself as well? In our weekly staff meetings, we begin with a moment of acknowledgments. Everyone goes around the table and thanks someone else on the team for something good they did in the past week. I see in the faces and in the eyes of my staff that they feel better at those moments. And I know for me what it's like on the receiving end. I'm mentoring a new director this year, and after our first mentoring session, she sent me a handwritten thank you note. I opened it. I felt great. I felt special. Now imagine what the students that we all interacted with felt like because of our better moods. Creating a more caring, a more empathetic team, it doesn't happen overnight. At MIT Hillel, we've actually engineered our staff to be more caring and more open with each other. When I started 9 years ago, everybody had supervision on a weekly basis, one-on-one with me. We spent time doing the tachlis of the day-to-day, and I also asked about each person and how they ticked, how they were, who they were. I wanted to be like the teachers and advisors I had had, who cared about me not just as another student, but as an individual. I wanted to emulate them. And you know what? When I showed my staff that I cared, they in turn cared about me. 3 years ago, I walked into the office on a Friday morning feeling great. TGIF, thank God Shabbos is coming. And I got a phone call from a favorite parent. Ready for that social call, only to learn it wasn't a social call. She called because her daughter, a freshman, had a roommate who had just committed suicide. She wanted me to be the one to break the news to her daughter. I found her daughter after class, and she collapsed. She then realized, oh my God, all of my friends, they can't hear from an email sent out to the entire MIT community. And she started texting them crazily as I found an empty conference room. And for the next 4 or 5 hours, I was holding space for 10 mourning students. I reached the end of what it was I was capable of giving, and I walked the students over to mental health, and I took the walk back to the Hillel offices, where my assistant director, Marissa, took one look at me and said, Michelle, we have Friday night dinner taken care of. Go home. This is a story of what, unfortunately, some of our students will go through during their college time. This is a story of needing to refuel. And this is a story of caring for each other and being open enough and vulnerable enough to accept that care. I was able to be there that day for our students, and I could be there for future students because Marissa paid attention. She saw that I was drained, she saw that I was done, and she knew what I needed to bring me back to wholeness. When we come from a place of empathy and care for another person, we don't always realize that we're doing something out of the ordinary. In preparing for today, I talked to Marissa about that evening. She recalls none of the conversation. I've never forgotten. We entered this work because we want to make a difference. We do this work because we want to have our students become strong adults making positive adult choices. We can only do this work when we care about ourselves and each other just as much. So make time for your friends and family. Take care of your health. Say thank you. Build a support network around you and listen to them. Be that positive role model. The work that we do, we can always do better. And that path to wholeness, it's long, it's nonlinear, it's never ending. But we can succeed because we're all in this together.